I want to thank you so much for joining us. I'm Mark Schumacher. I'm the Executive Vice President of the Home Furnishings Association, and this is our weekly webinar. And before we even get started today, I just want to make mention to those of you that are joining us for any of our members, colleagues, friends that are either in the fire zones in California or are in the pathway of what was Hurricane Laura. We know there's a lot of you that are dealing with some pretty serious stuff. And we just want you to know that we're here for you to help with whatever you need as your association. But today we're going to really be focusing on really financial matters based in and around COVID and business in this so-called new normal. I want you to be aware of a few things though before we start. This is being recorded. You can, of course, forward this later on to anybody you think would want to hear the conversation. It'll also be available on our website, which is myhfa.org. If you /COVID-19, you get to our resource page, which has been a must for anybody in our industry because it's a clearinghouse for absolutely the latest information relating to COVID. And also, we have handouts on the side of your screen there. You're going to see that we've got our HFA benefits guide. I'll talk more about that in a little bit. But also, if you have a question, please send the question in. We will get to it and we will have the conversation. So let me tell you who's joining us today. First and foremost, from Boston Interiors, we have Peter Theran. He's the CEO. This is a store chain that has 7 operating stores right now. And Peter and I had the opportunity to talk a lot during this crisis, and so I know that he has is battle tested and can bring a lot to the table today. And also, he's not aware I'm even going to say this, but Bobby Watson from Poot Judkins out in Redwood City, California, is probably the person that asks more questions on these webinars than anybody. He doesn't send them in anonymously. I get a question, as always, it's from Bobby, so I know who it is, but very, very active. And they have a single store there in Redwood City, California. So guys, first of all, thanks so much for joining us. We really appreciate it very, very much. I want to start out, and Bobby, I'll start with you. Since we're talking about financial matters, which I just know that today's conversation is so much different than it was 5 months ago. But what are the biggest takeaways that you had as a company, you're the co-owner of that company, coming out of this where you are right now, as far as from all the financial struggles and everything with small business loans, everything else? Give us a little bit of a synopsis of where you're at right now.
Well, I mean, thank you for having me first, but fortunately today, thanks to the government assistance that we got, we're going to survive. And that's the biggest relief for me. Those first few days when we were shut down and I looked at how much cash we had in the bank and with no idea how long we were going to be closed, and a knot got into my stomach like I've never had before. And it was a real learning process to get through that process.
So let's just call it what it is, just a great deal of fear, right? Because fear of the unknown. You got a finite amount of cash, no idea how long you were going to have to burn that. And with your business, I mean, you talk about the knot in your stomach. What about everybody around you? What was that environment like initially?
Well, it was, I mean, certainly we had to send all of our employees home. We were literally shut down by the county health order. We didn't know what to tell them as far as whether their jobs would be here when they got back or whether the store would even be open when this was all done. So it was just such a scary, scary time. We very quickly, within the first 48 hours of the shutdown, we applied for the emergency disaster loan. And I, kind of detailed those with you previously, but it was a real process. It was arduous, but eventually we were able to get that funding, and that was such a relief, to have that cash flow back.
And for those of you who may be familiar, we documented what Bobby and his team went through from the start of the process all the way through to getting that loan money in the bank, and it was great for everybody to kind of get a feel for that. Peter, you are in a part of the country up in the Massachusetts area that shut down first and reopened last. The worst case scenario, I guess, for retail. I know some of this from our conversations, but I wanted you to share the same thing before we get too deep into this. What were those first hours and days like when it was your businesses are being shut down?
Well, I mean, it was awful. A little bit of context is, I mean, we're private equity owned, and when I joined Boston Interiors almost 2 years ago, I came here because the company was in need of a turnaround, and we were quite successful prior to COVID, achieving what we needed to achieve, getting the company back on track. But when COVID happened, we had very finite access to cash. The company had been distressed. We had it going back the right direction, but the combination of that and the uncertainty of COVID, meaning investment money just wasn't out there. Nothing drives up opportunity to access money like uncertainty. So much like what Bobby described, the first thing we did is looked at how much cash we had and started running scenarios that says, okay, we can't know the unknowable. If we're closed for 2 weeks, this is what we look like. If we're closed for a month, this is what we look like. And the scenarios were, they were frightening. I mean, they were awfully frightening.
Well, for both of you, look, I realize that you're both good business people, but did you feel at any point early on that it was just, am I overmatched for this? Is this just the game that has no positive end to it? I mean, did you feel, even with whatever precautions you had taken in planning, et cetera, that it was just too big of an uphill battle? I mean, Bobby, I'm just curious. Were there those moments as well?
No, I mean, I saw it as a huge challenge, certainly. But I like to think I rise up to challenges. We have faced certainly disasters in the past. Many years ago in the mid 80s, our store burned down completely. I was just a kid at the time, but my dad had to pull us through that, and he did. And kind of having that information in my back pocket, I felt I could really pull it around.
Okay. And Peter, what about you? I know that you just said you'd been there about 1.5 years, a minute in some instances, but
Yeah, but I mean, I had the comfort that I took. I mean, partly just like Bobby said, we fairly quickly got into the PPP loan process without that, and then the subsequent changes to it. The original 8-week timeline on the PPP loan, because as you said, Mark, our shutdown was very long. It would have been useless. I mean, I would have had to just give the money back. I wouldn't have been able to use it. So, but it really was a godsend. But the thing I took comfort in was everybody simultaneously was in the same complete disaster. So I was fairly confident we could go to everyone, landlords, suppliers, all kinds of support resources, to say, look, this is what our situation is, and we're not gonna pay you, and I'm sure you understand why. We're gonna hold cash. I'm sure you understand why. And it wasn't like we were in an isolated case of malfeasance. Like I would have been much more frightened if we were a retailer who was in free fall in the absence of, some massive force. It was all our fault, in other words. Then I would have been scared. You're at the mercy of people you have no control over. Here, I kind of felt like we had control because no one had control. And we had a shot. I always felt like we had a shot.
That's a T-shirt. We had control because nobody had control. I like that. One of the things I always promise people when they watch one of these webinars is they're going to come away with some important nuggets. So let's dig in. And I appreciate giving everybody that little bit of context of both of you. But let's kind of talk about some of these things. We already have a number of questions here. Let's talk first of all about we talk about cash flow here. The ways that you managed that, do you feel the most successfully? What were those elements? Peter, I'm going to start with you first. What were the cash flow management things that you did that seemed to really work the best?
Well, I mean, first of all, the first thing we realized was cash was the only thing that mattered. Nothing else mattered. Cash was the only thing that mattered, that was going to decide whether we came out the other side or not. And the timeline of this crisis was not going to be known, and there was no point in guessing. So that was the best thing we did, was figuring that out right out front. Was the only thing that mattered was cash. And then simply we did two things. We paid no one, but we were completely transparent with everyone. I proactively called everyone. And I, in retrospect, believe that transparency, that lack of defensiveness, was really the key to getting great support and partnership.
Well, let me ask you a question. And I know that that was a survival approach, but has it already changed how you're going to deal or are dealing with vendors, et cetera, and landlords, et cetera, going forward? Because there's got to be some takeaways from that you can, it's not just you flip the switch when we're in an emergency. Has this changed some of the views that you have about the relationships with those creditors, et cetera?
Only to the extent that, and I don't want to sound immodest in this, I really don't, but to the extent we were completely transparent and I was honest and I was proactive in communicating, the respect that I got, the chips I acquired from that are paying off in a major way today. I mean, I get phone calls today with people saying, we're treating you this way because you did what you said you were going to do. If it was bad news, you called us and told us bad news.
Okay.
And that's the only way it changed. Now, honestly, it wasn't hard for me to do that because it wasn't my fault. I mean, I had no reason to be defensive. I'd rather just tell you the story. I mean,
well, sure, right.
I didn't screw up, so
I always use internally here. I use the metaphor about 5-card stud poker. It's not draw. You can't throw cards back. It's a horrible hand. You play it the best you can. I mean, you just have to, right? It's nobody's fault. You can't even blame the dealer. Bobby, let me ask you the same thing. What was the cash flow management? Some of those nuggets and the things that you did that you felt really worked well.
I mean, much like Peter, I mean, communication is the key. I mean, absolutely. I like to think that we had a very good communication with all of our suppliers and creditors even before COVID. But this just made it completely, just made it stronger, truthfully. The only other thing that we did was we didn't just look at our payables. We looked really ahead at what our future expenses were going to be and made those kind of calls too. We literally took out our P&L statement and went line by line on the expense side and said, what can we turn off? What can we do to conserve cash, to eliminate the expenses that are coming ahead? We slashed our advertising budget down to the bare bones, figuring if the store's not going to be open, there's not a whole lot of business we can generate in advertising. We reduced our phone bills. We turned off our garbage service. We literally did all these little incremental things that we knew may not stop the cash burn immediately, but would certainly help as the weeks went along.
And are those changes somewhat, I mean, not permanent, but are they somewhat set in stone now? Did you see from this things that you are now looking at differently on the expense side of the P&L?
Oh, no, absolutely. A lot of the expenses that we completely shut off or dialed way back, we have since brought right back to where they were prior to the pandemic. And some of them haven't. Our advertising, we've really changed our advertising, and we're probably spending, honestly, probably about 60% of what we were spending beforehand, and we're actually getting better results.
Okay.
So
more for less. We like that. Peter, I saw you kind of nodding during that, the comments he made about because you.
Well, yeah,
go ahead.
Yeah, everything Bobby said, we did similar things. Looked at every single place we could turn off the faucet. One of the things I found fascinating, I'll say, is how the conversation with landlords evolved over. We were shut down for 3 months, and over those 3 months, and the 3 months we did not pay rent. The first month we called people, there was okay, but we've got to create a plan so you can catch back up. That's the answer I got everywhere. They said, I get you're not paying me now, but maybe over the next 3 months you could pay a third. I mean, all kinds of plans. Okay. Month 2, there was more of we'll kind of, we'll see how this goes, and then over time we'll figure out a way to kind of catch up. By month 3, they were just grateful. We said, we're not going to pay you the 3 months we owe you, but we are going to reopen your store. I mean, it was fascinating how the perspective changed. Part of that, though, I have to be completely forthcoming with is our real estate strategy is built around being in B and C locations. I don't do business with Simon, not because they aren't a wonderful company with wonderful malls, but that's not our real estate strategy. So I had 9 stores and 9 landlords, and each of them having kind of mixed use portfolio of properties. So it was a different kind of conversation than if I was arm wrestling with a 500-pound gorilla, which I wasn't.
So for Bobby, one of the big takeaways was advertising. It's changed the spend, the focus. What about you, Peter?
We did, like Bobby described, we of course shut it all off when we were shutting down, and we were very fortunate that anything that had not actually run, we got full credit for from all of the media in our market. I mean, we're in one market, one media market, and that helps. Since we reopened, we've been spending at probably a similar level to what Bobby described, about 60%. But quite frankly, in this, like a lot of parts of the country, business is crazy good right now. Since we reopened, we really don't need the marketing spend we would normally need to drive traffic. I mean, our stores have been very, very busy from the moment we reopened them.
For Bobby, anything else on the expense side that other than advertising that you think was one of those those line items that you've seen really change now? You said there were some that came back, like you flipped the switch fully, but what are some of the others that they have not quite made it back because of you understanding more about their need?
Yeah, honestly, most things other than advertising have come back in most of the ways. When we got shut down, my sister and I, she owns the store with me, we decided that we still needed to come in. We needed to come into the store, answer the phone, answer the emails, answer website questions, anything we could do to just let people know that we weren't gone. We were still here. And during that time, we sat in the dark. We didn't turn the lights on. It was amazing just to sit in a 50,000 square foot showroom in the dark. But now obviously all the lights are back on.
Wow. I mean, I love that, but you know what? It's, somebody would have told you that's 6-7 months ago, you wouldn't have believed it, but that just seems like standard operating procedure for some of this situation that we've seen. Let me ask you from a standpoint of what are some of the things that you guys feel were difference makers, even if it's something as I've had questions here about software systems or anything like that. Were there any tools that you relied on? Peter, I'll start with you on this. Any tools that you had relied on that you're relying on now more than before? Was there anything that was super helpful that you can share with the folks listening?
Yeah, we other than the obvious ones, I can't really say yes to that. I mean, and obvious ones would be kind of like what we're doing right now. I mean, all of our meetings now are virtual. We encourage as many people as possible to stay home unless our technology, an example that would be our phone system for customer service is not of a caliber that enables work from home very easily, for example. But otherwise, we try to keep as many people home as possible. And I view it as my job to then keep everybody connected and feeling like there's no difference other than the fact they can dress a bit more comfortably. I mean, they are still part of the same family, and that's my job to do that. And I try to do that with every piece of technology that makes people feel closer, not more distant and more technically like it's all about ones and zeros instead of about relationships and teamwork.
Okay, all right, that's fair. And Bobby, any tools that you've used that you found particularly successful?
So certainly our website, right? I mean, we had a good website prior to this whole thing. But when we got shut down, and again, my sister and I came in and running the store, we were looking at the traffic on our website and it went nuts. And we have on our particular website a live chat feature. And where we used to get, say, 2 or 3 customers a day using that live chat, it jumped 10 times that. And it wasn't a chat bot. It was literally my sister and I being on the other side of the computer and talking to 2 or 3 customers simultaneously. And it was that, I know it sounds crazy because it's a chat, but that human interaction, the real words put back and forth, and the understanding of meaning, and the we could express to customers how much we wanted to help solve their problem, whatever their problem was. Sometimes it was they already had a piece of furniture on order, and am I ever going to get it? Other times is, and this happens so often, hey, I really need a desk for my kids to do their schoolwork on. Those kinds of things. That was key. Having that chat function and being able to interact with customers when we were shut down was crucial.
Again, you're looking for, you know, money in the door, however you can do it. I mean, that's a huge piece of it, was just engaging them. I want to remind people we're having a conversation today on the HFA webinar relating to financial matters before, during, and hopefully as we're coming sort of out of the main part of this COVID pandemic crisis from the retail standpoint. We're talking to Peter Theran of Boston Interiors and Bobby Watson of Hoot out in Redwood City, California. So a couple of interesting questions have come through, and since you guys are in the position to answer these, this one's interesting. How much, because I think, Peter, you were talking about the transparency with creditors and all the other partners dealing with. This says, how much of your financial information should an owner share with their staff? Now, you know, when you're in the dire straits, everything closes down. You know, transmitting that can be a good thing, bad thing, can be helpful to your staff. What do you think? How much of that information would you ever share with staff, or did you? And Peter, I'll start with you.
Well, regularly, whether I was talking with just my senior leadership team, which is a group of about 7 people, the question everybody wanted to know is, are we going to survive this? And I always chose to answer that question honestly, saying there's a possibility, no. There is definitely a possibility, no. And I would explain to them how a cash flow driven business like retail, what happens to a balance sheet when there is no cash flow. And I would explain that to them in a way that was factual and period. I wanted them to have good information. However, while I'd say it's possible that we won't, but there are also multiple ways that we succeed in this. And some of them were related to the fact that what I was kind of alluding to earlier, since everyone was in the same boat, our suppliers want us to succeed because they want to have a customer. Our landlords wanted us to succeed because they didn't see a lot of people lining up to take our space. Everyone wanted us to succeed. So there were paths, and I was candid about that too. I didn't see any reason. I mean, I didn't hand out financials, but mainly because most people wouldn't have understood them. But you know, but I was completely candid and honest with people and said, okay, now that we've had that conversation, come on, let's go fight like hell.
Okay, Bobby, what about you?
A lot of the same thing. I mean, we actually chose to keep all of our staff on the payroll during the entire shutdown. Most of my staff have been with me for a very, very long time. I didn't want to lose them. Because California is so expensive and we pay good wages, the unemployment benefits, even with the federal assistance, my employees, most of them would have still taken a hit. And so when we let them go, it was on a Tuesday, and that Friday was payday. And I said, oh, hey, you're going to get a paycheck on Friday. And then we're going to decide over the next 2 weeks what's going to happen. And we kept in touch with everybody with text messages and emails and said, hey, yes, you're getting paid again in 2 weeks. Don't worry. We want you back, and we're gonna do it. And then when we had applied for the disaster loan, we told them that we had applied for it. And we told them, hey, look, if we get that, we're golden. We'll come out of this on the other end. We don't know what we're going to look like, but we're going to come out of it.
We'll come out of it.
We'll come out of it. And you know what? Every employee I had, with the exception of one who chose to change careers, came back.
Wow. Let me ask you both a question. We talked about at the top of the program today about cash. Cash was king at that time when all this hit. That was everything. Have you changed philosophy? Do you have more cash on hand now? This is a question that's come through. In preparation for whatever happens, did you feel that what you had was adequate? Have you changed that whole formula? Peter, I'll start with you, but I'm just kind of curious since that was such a key element.
No, that is perhaps the most interesting topic at this point in time. I mean, because if I knew what our sales would be when we reopened, I would have spent the whole time at home, I don't know, working on my golf game. Because, if I knew the kind of sales results we were going to have when we reopened. I mean, because we were terrified we'd be 25% comps when we reopened, and that hasn't been the case. But we are so far from being out of the woods because sales is not cash flow.
Right.
And particularly in our business where a very large percentage of our sales are custom orders. And we collect 30% of it up front and 70% of it when we deliver. And with the very, very long lead times for product right now, cash flow continues to be the challenge, just in a different flavor than it was before. We have a metric we call sold not delivered, which is everything that we have written sales for, but it is somewhere out in the process of being manufactured and delivered to our warehouse, and it is a multiple of the highest it's ever been in the company's history right now. Now that's great, assuming we don't have mass cancellations of orders. That will turn into cash, but in the meantime, cash flow continues to be the only thing that matters in our business. And I have to manage carefully to that still, because that challenge has just taken a different flavor, but the challenge is still real.
Wow, Bobby, I have a follow-up, but I want to hear from you first on that as well.
Well, certainly we're in a far better cash flow position than we were even going into this. But at the same time, I'm sitting on that cash. I'm not really willing to spend it because I don't know what lays ahead. I mean, God forbid we get shut down again.
No, that's what I was asking. So do you feel like, are you holding right now a much higher percentage of cash than you did when the pandemic started?
Absolutely. 3 times as much.
Okay. And And then the follow-up question that came through here that somebody sent through is that what are you doing with that cash? Are there any sort of short-term accounts you're trying to get at least some some sort of income off of, or is it just, are you just sitting on it? Is it just right there? I mean, again, you don't have to give away all the company secrets here, but we've got other retailers on this call that are wanting to know.
Yeah. No, I can speak to that. I was very open with the major pools of creditors that we had about how I was going to prioritize my cash. The 3 major groups of people I owed money to were our product suppliers by a wide margin, number 1, landlords, number 2, and then marketing expenses, media, et cetera, was number 3. And I told the marketing expenses, you're third on that list for money. We will pay you eventually, but I'm going to pay my suppliers first, because if I don't have product, I'm not going to run ads. Okay. So, and was completely open with them, and they understood that. No one argued with that logic, and they were willing to let me pay as I go while I just kept a balance with them. Next, landlords, we had good success with them accepting an approach that, even though we haven't got to final resolution with all of them about outstanding balances and truly what should that number be, but nobody feels urgency to do that. They'd rather get healthy and then start talking about getting to kind of a final resolution there. Suppliers have been our priority from the get-go. My goal was to put ourselves in a position that I would get absolute complete support from them, which I did early on, but I knew sooner or later they would run out of patience, and you had to prioritize them. And that approach so far has worked. I wouldn't change anything about how we've done that part of it so far.
Now, no, Peter, you said you don't have you're not yet, you're still digging in for more cash based upon the current situation. Bobby, there was the kind of the follow-up question there was, is there any thought to investing any cash surplus you have now in an effective way to try to build the cash?
No, we haven't done that. It's literally just sitting in the bank, partly because the large chunk of the cash that's sitting on the bank was the money that we got from the economic disaster loan. So we got this pool of money, and the SBA gave us basically 6 months worth of operating cash. And we needed to burn through about 2 months of that to keep us afloat. But then once we reopened and businesses have been so good, we've rebuilt that entire 6 months of cash back. It's just sitting in the bank. Now, we might decide come next year when the first payment on that EDL is due, we might just pay it all back. I don't know. We haven't made that decision yet.
Okay, gotcha. So you need that to be as accessible as possible at that point to be able to do that. I want to remind folks, because this is hard to believe we're past halfway here on this webinar on our Thursday. Mark Schumacher here from the Home Furnishings Association with Peter Theran from Boston Interiors and Bobby Watson from Group Judkins out in California. So let's you guys have all talked about having to really take a hard look at expenses, and I know, Bobby, you mentioned about the fact that you were trying to keep people on payroll, and Peter, I know that you're now from 9 stores down to 7. Let's talk a little bit about one of the big expenses, which is payroll. And of course, I don't want that to sound so cold, because payroll means people. But is there? Can you give us, and Peter, I'll start with you. Do you have a different feel for that, or a different look at that now based upon what you've known during this crisis, and that investment and that part of the financial ledger? Talk a little bit about payroll for us.
Yeah. First of all, because of some of the background of what preceded COVID, we were running a pretty lean operation before. So there wasn't a lot of fat to trim. I was pretty confident that we had just the right number of people, the right people in the right positions going into this. That part hasn't changed substantially. During shutdown, which was very long, one of the biggest breaks we got was being based in Massachusetts. Massachusetts has the highest unemployment insurance in the country. So when you complemented that with the federal supplement, I knew my people weren't enduring hardship. We furloughed all but 2 people in the company, and that was a huge benefit. I didn't have to consider doing what Bobby described. We were able to just furlough people, and they were taken care of, and that was a wonderful bit of good fortune for us. We nearly everyone who we wanted to bring back did come back. We had a little bit of natural attrition. We had a couple people, 3, who didn't come back because they weren't comfortable coming back to a position that was out working with the public every day in this world. And that's fine. I'm comfortable with that. So the human capital, the talent element, which is the most important part of our business, selling mid to high end furniture that's mostly custom designed, it's all people. And we were very lucky to keep the kind of talent that we really needed, and we have great people. And they came back, and they were thrilled to come back.
But I know you'll admit it, but we had conversations during where there was concern about that high unemployment level in as far as the dollars with that federal $600 popped on top there. I know that you had concerns like everybody else doing business up there if people would come back. That was a real concern for a while, wasn't it?
Well, we had people in some of the lower wage roles, like some of the warehouse roles that would be at kind of the lower end of the compensation spectrum in our company. They were making 150% of their normal compensation sitting at home. The kind of stories you only read about, However, when it was time for people to come back and we'd call them and ask them to come back, we got no pushback. People were thrilled people looked at it the opposite of the way I was afraid they would look at it. They looked at it and said, it was wonderful that I got all that money while I was out. Not, what are you going to do for me? I'm better off staying home.
Right,
well, in
right.
reality, they wouldn't have been, but, you know.
No, okay.
So, I mean, you know, we had good people who looked at it the right way. I'm grateful.
Bobby, I know that you said, you kept everybody, at least at the time. Has your approach to payroll changed at all? Since we're talking about financially today, is there any part of that that has changed? I know you're doing more with less with advertising, but what about the rest of the operation?
I'm actually trying to hire people. I need more salespeople at this point in time. We lost one person because, like I said, he changed career paths. I had one other salesperson who just, like, within the last 2 weeks retired, and I need to backfill those positions desperately because we're so busy.
Okay, so anybody that's going to hear about this in the Redwood City, California area, you now have a place you can go check out for a possible job. Let me ask you both this. Has the focus on finances, has it changed at all the approach to benefits for the staff? Peter, we'll start with you.
No, not at all. Not a single change in that area. None.
Okay, did you take a hard look at it? I mean, just to know, or was it just unequivocally not going to happen?
No, never was on the table. That conversation never came up. So our benefits are solid and they're competitive. It's not like I would have had benefits in our package that would have stuck out, like, oh my gosh, do we really need to be doing that? Nobody does that. No, we offer a solid competitive package, and we offer a beautiful store to work in and the right kind of environment for people who are commission motivated.
And I hope that everybody listening has just connected the dots, because what Peter just said that's provided and that they held as one of their key promotional pieces for their team and staff may be the reason why they all came back. I'm just saying, but listen, because the one lesson we've learned from so many retailers during this crisis is those great best practices you used before it happened have just absolutely magnified when the crisis hit. So the things you did really, really well to care for your teams in particular, connect with your teams, really resonated in a bigger way after that. Bobby, what about you? I saw you nod your head no as well. So any hard looks at any of the benefits, et cetera?
No, we take very, very good care of our employees. Most of our staff has been with me for many, many years. I treat them like family. I think they consider me to be part of their family. When finally in latter part of May, we could bring them back, they all were so excited to come back. I mean, honestly, I think they're all sick of sitting at home too. It gave them something to do.
Well, let me ask you both this also. So we're sitting here today, 27th of August. We've obviously, we came out of the gates so much stronger than anybody thought. So sales for a lot of people are really, really good, but we know we have this supply chain issue, and we know that we're having to tell customers again and again of delays and things of that sort. So I guess my question is from and again, we're focusing finances, from a financial standpoint, what are some of the things that are potentials on the horizon that concern you as we continue to try to this economy, trying to come out of this, and what long-term looks like? Peter, what are some of the things that you're concerned about, that you're maybe planning for from that financial side of things?
Well, the one thing I worry about really is the possibility of being shut down again. I don't believe that will happen. I feel that's pretty unlikely. I live in a state that has been very aggressive and structured. And as I like to tell people say, how come Massachusetts has had good luck managing this? I said, I think it's because we're just rule followers. You tell us what to do, we do it. We don't rebel. We don't say you're infringing on our liberties. We just do what we're told here, I think. So, but that is the one thing I worry about, because I kind of feel like at this point, and partly because we have superb support from our lender, the bank who we are partnered with, who has walked right with us and didn't need to during the darkest times of the last number of months. But if we don't shut down again, then I'm not really afraid of what's coming. It's not that it won't be hard work and maybe take a few years off my life, but whatever. But that's the one thing I fear. right now is some horrendous flare up that there is no option but to shut the economy down again. And that I can't even ponder that. I don't need to plan for that, actually.
Bobby, what about you? What are some concerns you have in the next few weeks or few months?
Well, I mean, it's 2020, so you never know what's around the corner. I mean, we could have an earthquake tomorrow. I mean,
Yes.
which is crazy. But no, being shut down I would agree with that completely. My other, concerns, but they're much less as far as being shut down, are things like logistics, getting product to us. There's so much product moving around, and I know that's been part of the delays I've heard from various suppliers of ours, is they've had a hard time getting carriers to move stuff. I've seen I've seen a handful of our suppliers starting to implement price increases that they all blame on COVID. A couple of them have instituted price increases because they said they've had to increase their wages because in order to get more employees because they're so busy. So those kind of trickle down type costs, and of course every time our costs increase, we have to raise our prices. I mean, we're not going to just cut into our margins. So it's that balancing act of, is the consumer going to really be willing to spend X dollars for that product today versus when it might be 15% higher tomorrow?
Peter, are you still feeling the same? I know you said you guys do an awful lot of custom work, but are you also seeing a little bit of a pressure on the pricing side? Are you seeing prices increase?
Not really. I think partly because so much of our work is custom. So we're not a price point like $7.99, $9.99, $11.99 kind of business. Somebody walks in. I mean, not that isn't a part of our business at all. Of course not. But people walk in and they develop the perfect product for their home, working with our designers, and everyone on our floor is a designer. So the price sensitivity is not as much of a challenge for us. And as a result, if a cost increase comes along, we don't worry too much about just passing it along and protecting our margin like Bobby described. But we're in a less price sensitive kind of engagement model.
I know that we talked about, one of your concerns is, and you're not thinking it's a possibility at this point, or a very, very big one about a second shutdown. But my question is that, is this crisis, is this a wake up call for every business owner and CEO, et cetera, about being prepared for whatever the disruption is? I mean, you said it a second ago, Bob, you jokingly kind of said, well, if we have an earthquake, well, we've got a couple parts of the country right now, even parts of California, that are dealing with some catastrophes that could, one of the byproducts could be a pretty substantial disruption. And I'm just wondering if coming out of this pandemic, you feel that you're better prepared for whatever would happen next, and is it, when it comes from the financial situation. Peter, what do you think?
As I've said to many people over the last number of months, I've been doing this for a long time, and I never once modeled what happens to my balance sheet if I have no revenue for 3 months. Never crossed my mind to do that. Okay.
All right.
I will say what I think everyone will do, though, is you'll look at things like how you protect yourself more thoroughly. I mean, you can't guess all the things that might happen. You'd lose your mind. You should be in another business if that's how you're thinking all the time.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, how you approach your business interruption insurance and other things that protect you for relatively small amounts of money. I think we'll look at all of that quite differently. I mean, we hear about how the task force that the government had to address a global pandemic was eliminated during the early part of the Trump administration. Well, I'm not trying to judge who was right or wrong on that. I'm saying because everybody probably said, what are the odds we're going to have a global pandemic? This is the 13th century. I mean, the plague sweeps the world. Well,
right.
Maybe I think we will think about things like that quite differently. And what is the way to protect yourself?
Bobby, what about you?
Same thing. I mean, I've thought, one of my other worries during this was, what are the finances of my suppliers? What if I lose my biggest supplier? What would I do? And having some contingency plans of, well, we probably could bring in this or that. But I agree with Peter. I mean, it's kind of having some. This whole COVID has really taught me to plan ahead to a certain extent for the next disaster, whatever it might be. It could be losing half my staff. I don't know why I would, but whatever. And again, I agree with Peter. You can't worry about this stuff constantly. It would absolutely drive you nuts. But I think making decisions in the future about how we're going to spend our money, there's going to be a little twinge in the back of my head about what happened and what might happen again.
And how much you have in reserve, things. Those are just natural byproducts, what we're talking about today. And as far as the, I mean, I know you say you can't worry about it constantly, but so if you're, and you are, because you're talking to a number of other retailers, what are the couple little top nuggets that you're going to take away from this pandemic when it comes to financial stability and things like that of your companies? Both your companies are very different, but I'm just kind of curious. Bobby, I'll start with you. What are the give us what you think those one or two biggest takeaways are going forward?
Well, again, I don't think I ever realized how important cash was, to have cash on hand. And people had told that to me in the past, but having never been in a catastrophe, I didn't respect it enough. And so certainly the biggest change we're going to make is you're going to see that we're going to have operating cash put aside, not spent, for just the emergency. The rainy day fund is really what we're going to concentrate on.
Okay, Peter?
Yeah, and part of the reason I agree with Bobby, first of all, just like in your personal life, every financial planner tells you have 6 months of living expenses socked away just in case. The other part of the equation that none of us really thought about in advance is when something like this happens, not only will you burn cash, but there won't be cash to access. I mean, we're a private company. We couldn't go to the markets to raise cash. There wasn't a way to go to investors to raise cash. Why would they? There was no way to go get cash easily for many of us. For other people, they were in a different position, and this was just a huge hit to their income statement. But this is, I don't want to be in that position again. We accept that the nature of retail is you have up years and down years. That's fine. But I don't want to be in a position where cash is going to put at risk a fabulous and profitable business model. And that's why most businesses go out of business too. It's not lack of profit, it's lack of cash.
I want to remind everybody you've joined us here for the HFA webinar, and we have along with us here Peter Theran of Boston Interiors and Bobby Watson of Hoot Judkins in Redwood City, California. And I'd be remiss, since I'd be both here, not to also ask, because this is also clearly the financial side as far as bringing money in the front door. What are the things you're both doing? Because everybody always wants to hear you share. What are the things you're doing right now that are the most successful when it comes to driving sales in this very unique sales world, Bobby?
We're putting a lot of emphasis on our digital marketing campaigns, driving website traffic. That's been key. Being very, very open with the public about what our safety measures are here at the store, making people feel comfortable, reminding them that we have a huge showroom and we only have so many people in the store at a given time, and it's there's going to be a lot less people in our store than there's going to be right next to you at the grocery store, and so that's one great reason to come in. From a marketing standpoint, we've been not necessarily discounting stuff as much as maybe we were prior to this pandemic, but one of the things that we've been doing is soliciting a donation from our customers at time of purchase of $25, And in return for that $25 donation, we give the customer a discount on their sale equal to the sales tax. And people love it. We take all the money that's donated and we donate to the San Mateo County Strong Fund, which is basically the COVID relief fund that supports local small businesses that are having a real hard time. And we've raised $25,000 so far, which has been great. And customers love it because they feel like they're a part of it. They're given something, but they're getting something in return. And they really like that idea.
Does anybody ever say no to that? With the way you just laid it out, I'm like going, how can anybody say no to that?
No. In fact, we've actually had people that, they're buying a big purchase, several $1,000s, and the sales tax, which is high here in California, amounts to $200 or $300. And they'll say, $25 and you're going to give me a $300 discount? And we're all, yeah. Well, heck, I'll give you $100 and you give me the $300. Oh, great, fine, wonderful. You're helping a good cause.
Wow, that might be a full program for another day. I don't know. Peter, first of all, what do you think about that? That's kind of cool. What's your comment on that?
I don't even know what to say to that one. That's brilliant. That's beautiful work. So
give me an idea from your standpoint, and as far as what you found successful in driving business to get revenue through that front door as we try to build that cash up. What are the things that are working for y'all right now?
Well, we have not, since we reopened, had any trouble with traffic, with demand. So all of our focus in terms of putting people in a position to feel comfortable making decisions and buying right now has been on engagement, less so on marketing. What are the things, the unique needs a customer has right now? Now, early on, it was safety. That our store is safe, it's clean, we have excellent practices in place, we exceed the state's guidelines for safe operation of our store, and perhaps more prominently for home delivery of our furniture, because a large majority of our sales are delivered to the home. And it's one thing when you decide to enter somebody else's home, meaning our store. It's another when you invite people into yours. And making people comfortable with that decision has been a huge focus for us. Right now, more of our focus on the engagement side is helping people understand that the long lead times, which are disappointing for customers today, are industry-wide. This is not a Boston Interiors thing. It's a furniture industry thing. You can go next door and they will tell you the exact same thing, and making people confident that the right decision is to accept that answer and buy the piece of furniture that will change their lives. So but engagement has been more our focus than marketing, because people have so many and such different needs right now to be comfortable and have a great experience.
Well, exactly. I mean, the customer experience, I talk to retailers on a daily basis, and that's the thing that everybody is saying is driving everything right now. And actually, some have had. Let me ask you this while I got yours. We got a couple more seconds here, but have either of you had any issues on social media? Because we've also heard that there's been a frustration level for customers, even with the most, engagement and information about their delivery, and it's been delayed again. And some places we know are getting hit with some negative social media comments and things like that. Either of you had any issues with that at all, Bobby?
No, we haven't had any problem with that. But one of the things is, much like Peter's stores, tremendous volume of our business is special order stuff. And it's, our salespeople are very well trained on how to set expectations. And when those expectations aren't going to get met, to proactively reach out to the customer and tell them that there's going to be a problem down the road, that, hey, we told you it was going to take 6 weeks, but we've learned now it's going to be 10. And if you reach out to the customer and give them that information, 95 times out of 100, they're going to say, wow, that's great information. We'll wait. We appreciate it. Versus if you told somebody it's going to be 6 weeks and on the 8th week, they call us, then they're mad.
That's a problem, right? Okay. I mean, you at this, you have to set expectations. And now, Peter, is yours any easier or more difficult because of all the custom aspect of it? Are you still having that same thing, or do you have a little bit more of a date certain?
Yeah, No, it's not different because of that, but a lot of it is because, like Bobby described, our associates truly own their customer. They truly own every order, and they take that responsibility very seriously, and they're compensated very well for it. So the biggest, if I could do everything over again, there was one thing we did very poorly, and I was thinking about that when Bobby was talking about sitting in the dark with his sister, but we overreacted. That's not quite the right term. When the state shut us down, we overreacted. As a company, we're very conservative. We wanted to follow the guidance from the state to the letter, and our communication to customers while we were shut down was poor. And any problems we created with customer ill will was around that period of time where we were basically dark. And that was a terrible decision. Now we fixed it. I mean, but we shouldn't have had to. I mean, we shot ourselves in the foot and then bandaged ourselves quite well, but we shouldn't have had to do that. We should have not shot ourselves in the foot in the first place, and that was a terrible error.
Well, I'm gonna absolve you from the standpoint of, you said it earlier, this is your first pandemic. And if it happens the next pandemic, then
I'll be better in the next. I'll be awesome.
You'll be much better.
Yeah.
Okay. There's been a ton of nuggets that the two of you have really brought forward today that have been key, not only in what you went through, but going forward. I just want to highlight a couple of them just to remind people, because there's some great stuff in here. You both talked about transparency and how important that was for creditors, suppliers, et cetera. Communication, Bobby, you said was absolutely key in all of that. And that cash is critically important. It was at the beginning of the crisis. It's even more important now. And Bobby, you shared that you were at the moment keeping 3 times as much on hand, which is partly keeping a loan in the bank, but still it makes a lot of sense. But again, it just all comes down to you guys talked about really looking at everything critically on that expense side. And also, Peter, we heard from you saying, if you invest in your employees now, it'll be something that will pay off no matter what the next disruption is. So some great stuff. Let me remind everybody that this recording is going to be hfa.org/COVID-19. Please share it. Also, if you want to continue this discussion, we have our HFA Retailer to Retailer Facebook group. I encourage you to go there as well. And also, before you leave, in the handout section to the right side of your screen is the HFA benefits guide. Both of these gentlemen are members of this, and their companies are members of HFA. And I know personally from conversations and knowledge that they've done a lot to take advantage of many of the things that we offer, and that those have been helpful as well. So this is a great point to just talk about the fact that there's strength in numbers, and we would love to have you as part of the association. So Peter Theran, Boston Interiors, thank you so much for the time today and the insights. We appreciate that, and continued strong business, especially going into the weekend with your sales tax weekend. Hopefully it'll be huge. And Bobby, first and foremost, really quickly before we go, are you guys okay from the fires that are burning in your region?
Yes, we are safe. We're not in any burn area, thank goodness. I mean, it is affecting thousands and thousands of people around us. And certainly our hearts go out to us. A lot of people have been affected and have had to evacuate their houses, but we're doing okay.
Well, appreciate that update, and we hope for both of your continued good health, your families, your staffs, and good business. And for everybody else, we wish you the same. We thank you as always for joining us here on our HFA weekly webinar. I'm Mark Schumacher. We will see you next time.
Thank you, Mark. Take care.
Take care, guys.
Take care, Bobby.